Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and I'm bringing you a brand new scandal today. And we're going to talk about dentist James Tolliver Craig. Now, James Tolliver Craig ran a dental practice in Aurora, Colorado. He was 45 years old. He was married to Angela Craig, and they had been married since 1999, and they had 6 children, a very big family. And Angela was described by friends as very involved in her children's life, even though she had 6 children to raise. And God knows that that is a ton of work. She also worked as a family history consultant, which is basically helping people trace their family roots. So I'm going to bring you into the morning of March 15th of 2023, and Angela is admitted to the hospital. She's very dizzy and she's having severe headaches. Within 3 hours of being admitted to the hospital, she starts suffering a seizure, and that begins with a rapid medical decline. She gets placed on life support in the intensive care unit, and on March 18th, she is pronounced dead. Now, the very next day, it may surprise you to learn that her husband, a successful dentist in Colorado named James Craig, is arrested and charged with first-degree murder in her death. But how did we get to that point? How did a seemingly healthy woman in her 40s suddenly get sick and die? Well, this wasn't the first time that month she had been in the hospital. As a matter of fact, she had been getting increasingly sick throughout the month of March. She went to the hospital on March 6th, then went back to the hospital on March 9th, and she actually stayed until March 14th, a whole 5 days during that hospital stay, as doctors were trying to figure out what is wrong with this seemingly healthy lady. She does get discharged on March 14th. The next day was unfortunately her final stay. Now, her symptoms during that time included extreme vomiting, headaches, low blood pressure, dizziness. Her eyes couldn't focus. She knew something was seriously wrong with her. And as I said, on March 18th, she would tragically die. The very next day, March 19th, James Craig is arrested for the first-degree murder of his wife. And we're going to get into it. And I'm going to reference the arrest warrant and tell you exactly what allegedly went on to lead to this death. And I promise you, this is going to shock you. So, according to the affidavit, an investigator by the name of Bobby Olson with the Aurora Police Department, who was a 10-year veteran with that department, incidentally, very experienced, he investigated this case. And he said on March 15th at approximately 11:08 a.m., Angela Craig presented herself to the University Hospital because she had a severe headache and was experiencing dizziness. Now, Angela was accompanied by her brother, Mark Prey, and later by dentist James Craig. At approximately 2:00 p.m., Angela experienced a seizure, and that started a rapid decline medically. Eventually, she was placed on life support. However, hospital medical personnel could not find a known medical condition that would have caused Angela to have that seizure and go into this rapid decline. The detective was told James was a dentist who worked for Summerbrook Dental Group. He actually owned that, and he had a business partner. Now, that business partner's name is Ryan Redfern, who was also a dentist. Now, he wasn't a dentist at James's business. He was a dentist elsewhere, but he was a partner financially in James's business. And Ryan and his wife, Michelle, they were very good friends with James Craig and Angela. Now, on March 15th, 2023, James, he texts Ryan's wife, Michelle, and he tells her that Angela had been admitted to the hospital and her condition was, quote, grave. So what do you think Michelle did? Well, she calls her husband Ryan, and they both respond to University Hospital. So obviously, y'all, these people were very good friends as well as business partners. And this guy, Ryan, and his wife, they were very concerned. They rushed right to the hospital like many of us would do for our besties, right? At the hospital, Ryan spoke with one of the nurses regarding his suspicion that Angela was a possible victim of poisoning. He went on to explain to this nurse that James recently ordered potassium cyanide for their dental practice. And he added there was no medical reason or purpose to order that for a dental practice. So at this point, y'all, the nurse does what she has to do by law, which is to report that to police. Nurses are what's known as a mandatory reporter. Not only are they expected to report things like that to police, by law, they are required to report that to police, much like teachers are also mandatory reporters. And this nurse reports that, and of course, an investigation ensues. So at this point, Angela is still alive, but it's not looking good. And in the early morning hours of the next day, the detective speaks with Ryan and Michelle Redfern at the Aurora Police Department headquarters. And they came of their own free will to speak to that detective, of course. And Ryan started by saying he and James had been business partners since August of 2022, when Ryan acquired James' dental practice, which had been struggling financially, and they had known each other for over 20 years. They even went to dental school together, so they were like brothers. Ryan described James as a risk taker, and he found out that James had filed for bankruptcy in 2021 and was already on the verge of bankruptcy again. Ryan also stated that in January, just a couple of months before this incident, James confided in Ryan that he and Angela were having marital problems. Now, why is the bankruptcy important to mention? Well, if you're having money problems like that, you've already been through one bankruptcy, now it looks like you're going to be going through another one, that's going to create a lot of stress. And some people under stress, they freak out. They do crazy things. But also the fact that he and his wife are having marital problems, it's not looking good for the dentist. So Ryan goes on to say that the prior day, which was March 15th of 2023, the day that Angela was admitted to the hospital, the office manager for the dental practice, someone by the name of Jacqueline Cauldron, called him as he was driving to the hospital. And she told him that she was contacted by another office manager named Caitlin Romero, who also worked for them. And Jacqueline said that Caitlin told her that on March 6th of 2023, which incidentally was the day Angela first became sick, James returned to the office after hours. She said she saw James at an exam room computer. The lights were off and he was doing something on that computer. And she found that strange because James had his own office with his own computer. And he also had a personal laptop that he took everywhere with him, yet he was using the office computer. She just had never seen him do that before. Caitlin went on to say approximately 30 minutes after James left the dentist's office, he texted her and he told her he would be receiving a personal package and went out of his way to tell her, do not open it. He stressed that to her several times in that conversation. Well, Caitlin said the package did indeed arrive for James, and that was on March 13th of 2023. And Caitlin had found that the package box had been opened. Caitlin said she found out another employee actually opened that package, and she looked inside it and she saw a biohazard sticker and what said potassium cyanide on the canister. So Caitlin realized that that was the package for James, and I'm sure she kind of freaked out because she wasn't supposed to be opening that box. And though she didn't open it, she knew he would think she did. So she sealed it back up, gave it to James, and she didn't mention to him that it had already been opened. But Caitlin, like a lot of us, she was curious. And she had that little hair stand up on the back of her neck, right? She just didn't feel right with that. So she got home and she Googled potassium cyanide. She wanted to see the uses of it. Maybe she had some sort of sixth sense. And when she pulled it up, it had a list of symptoms along with what the product actually was. And she realized these are the same symptoms that James's wife, Angela, is currently having. Because it was kind of the talk of the office that she was sick, even in the early stages of her sickness. So then the detective asked Ryan about what occurred at the hospital. How was their interactions with James? And Ryan went on to say that he and his wife, Michelle, they arrived in separate vehicles at the hospital, but one waited for the other and they went in the hospital together. And upon arriving, they both briefly spoke to James, but while they were speaking to him, his phone started to ring, and it was from one of the doctors at the hospital. So James stepped away. And Ryan said that while James was on the phone, a nurse came out to talk to them. And that's when James pulled the nurse to the side and told her about the concerns that he had regarding the possibility that Angela may have been poisoned with potassium cyanide. So it's at that point that Ryan and Michelle, they leave the hospital waiting room and they head back to their car. And they get back to Michelle's vehicle and they decide they want to talk about this for a minute with each other. And they both sit in Michelle's car and they talk for a minute. And Ryan gets a phone call. And that phone call is from James. Now, he called Ryan on his personal cell phone, but his personal cell phone hooks up to the Bluetooth in his wife's car when he's in there. And so when he answers the call, it's actually connected to the vehicle, and obviously Michelle can hear everything that's being said. So during the conversation, James tells Ryan that he heard some disturbing information and asked Ryan if he had said anything to the hospital staff. And I guess this kind of pissed Ryan off. This guy's going to confront me, and he's, at this point, fully believes he poisoned his wife. So Ryan admits that he talked to the hospital staff about the incident. He basically says, yeah, I told the hospital staff about you ordering fucking potassium cyanide, which has no use in dental work, and that I believe you poisoned your wife. And James replied that the package was a ring for Angela that he wanted to surprise her with. And then Ryan replied, well, I know you don't think that package was opened, but it was, and we know it wasn't a ring. So when James hears this, he knows he's kind of caught, and he admits the package did contain potassium cyanide, but he claimed Angela told him to order it. He went on to say Angela did not have the proper credentials to order it herself, so he ordered it. But he didn't think Angela would actually take it and tried to compare it basically to being similar to a game of chicken. Essentially, Angela said, I want to kill myself, order some potassium cyanide. He acted like he didn't think she was going to do it, so he ordered it and she did it anyway. Total bullshit, right? But that's his dumbass story. Ryan told James the following: I'd advise you to stop talking and get a lawyer. And he hung up on him. So at this point, the detective interviews Michelle, Ryan's wife, and she corroborated everything her husband said. And she went on to say that on March 6th, Angela got dizzy, went to the hospital, was released the same day. A few days later, on March 9th, same thing, returned to the hospital. But this time she was held for 5 days, was released on March 14th, and then March 15th, she gets admitted again. And that was, of course, her last time being admitted. And her brother Mark brought her that time. Now, Michelle said that she had exchanged text with James since Angela was admitted to the hospital on March 9th. And she's being a good friend, right? She's trying to be kept in the loop on Angela's condition. And she knew a lot about the medical field. This lady actually has a PhD in nursing and was a professor of nursing at a college. In the affidavit, there are text messages back and forth between James and Michelle. It's primarily Michelle just asking about symptoms, etc. Very concerned about her friend. But it's during one of these, and I'm not going to read all the text messages back and forth, but one in particular stuck out to me. And that is when they're going back and forth talking about the symptoms. James responded to one of these texts by saying, quote, "If it wasn't my wife, this would be kind of a fun puzzle to try to work out," unquote. I mean, is it just me, or is that really out of place? A very off-putting comment for one to make when their wife is on their deathbed, practically. They wrap up the rest of that interview. Michelle and Ryan leave. And then later on, Michelle contacts the investigator again. And she states that James called Ryan, but Ryan basically put it through to voicemail. He don't want to talk to this guy. He knows what's up. But then he receives some text from James. And I'm going to read those texts to you. It says, "Ryan, thank you for taking my patient load today. I want to make an urgent plea to you. If we were ever friends, please do me a favor. Please do not talk to anyone about what we talked about last night, including any law enforcement officers." And he's talking about the potassium cyanide, right? "You are under no obligation to answer their questions unless you are served a subpoena. And you will do more damage than good to my family by continuing to insert yourself into this. Angela is gone, and I am devastated. There is nothing that I can do to bring her back, and I want desperately to tell you all of the details so you can better understand what's going on behind the scenes with her. There is so much that you don't know that I wish you did. If you knew everything, this would make so much sense to you, but there's no use in telling you right now. You and I have a history, and the other partners and Jackie all talking about me behind my back and deciding what you think is best, and then you're always the fall guy that has pulled the trigger or tell me what you've decided about me. In fact, yesterday you didn't even come to me. I had to seek you out. You have never given me the advantage of talking with me first. You just decide and act and hope I'll pick up the pieces later. This is a pattern in our business dealings, and now it's become a factor in our personal dealings. Let me paint a picture for you of what this has done. Yesterday, I had to tell my kids that their mom was not going to wake up, and they were there to say their final goodbyes. This was at 6:45 p.m. The hospital said we could bring the kids up to say goodbye at that time. But because of your investigation, you opened by your incomplete information, the hospital has made those poor, grieving, hysterical kids wait until after 10 o'clock to see their mom. After an hour or so of saying goodbye to her, we went home just before midnight, only to have our house sealed against entry by the police. Instead of getting to go home and find comfort, they were met with flashing lights and cold, unfeeling cops. And to the kids, this was scary and confusing. Family is starting to come into town today, and I have to tell them I can't come to my house and try to explain why. I have to hire a homicide attorney to make sure I don't end up being painted in a light that some hungry DA is anxious to paint me in, because I will most likely be going to be charged, even though that is absolutely not what happened. Ryan, I understand why you did what you did. I do. I get it. But if you had to come to me personally, man to man, instead of talking to everyone else about what you thought you knew, I might have let you in on some details that would have made you less likely to cause this horrible storm. Man, Ryan, if you had only put me higher on your list of priorities instead of putting everyone else's opinions and gossip ahead of me. For that, I am very, very mad at you. I have talked to you about this multiple times, but you don't seem to care. And now what you thought was responsible has become reckless and so destructive. And so I'm asking, if there was ever any love in your heart for me, please do not make this any worse by talking to any officers or anyone else about this, unless you are forced to legally do so. And whoever else on the team you think is going to be questioned, I would ask that you privately ask them to honor this request too. Also, please do not respond to this text message until I text you again. The balls on this fucking guy, right? All about him. Infuriating. And we'll move on. So at this point, the office manager I told you about, Caitlin, she gets contacted by the detective, and she meets him at the police department to speak with him. And she had been working at the dentist office for approximately 6 months. And she stated that she worked directly for James at the Summerbrook Dental, and that Ryan is not a dentist there. He just is a partner in the financial aspect of that dental clinic. Caitlin also said that she knew that on March 6, 2023, James and his wife Angela worked out in the morning together. And before that workout, James made Angela some sort of protein shake or pre-workout shake. And she said it was at that point that Angela started feeling sluggish. So James gave her extra protein, and it was after that workout that Angela began feeling faint, dizzy, and ultimately James brought her to the hospital that day. Caitlin also said that she started to notice odd, strange things around the office. And she mentioned on March 6th, towards the end of the day, he was in the back of the medical exam room on that computer, which she found strange, and I told you that story. She also said it was during that time frame with Angela in the hospital that James had conversations with her, where he told her he didn't think his wife was going to make it. And in that same conversation, James would ask how business was in the office. And that kind of took Caitlin back, right? Your wife, again, is on her deathbed, and you're worried about how business is in the office. Just seemed really strange where his priorities were at that point. Caitlin also told the detective about that March 13th, 2023 incident in which one of the office attendants opened that package that contained the cyanide. So she confirmed everything that Ryan and Michelle had told police. She said she had never seen potassium cyanide delivered to the office and said, honestly, I didn't even know what it was for, so I performed a Google search, and it was in that search that I noticed the side effects of ingesting potassium cyanide were the same symptoms that Angela was exhibiting: nausea, vomiting, and low blood pressure specifically. Caitlin then said she spoke to James on March 14th, 2023, and he mentioned that Angela was discharged. And right after she got discharged, Caitlin said James told her Angela started accusing her husband of trying to poison her, and said specifically something along the lines of, there are poisons they do not test for, because allegedly James told his wife, well, if I tried to poison you, they tested for all that and didn't find anything. He's already trying to cover his tracks, right? Well, he tells Caitlin about that whole conversation. He said that Angela was sent home on oxygen, but they didn't know what was wrong with her. And Caitlin said at some point, she called the other office manager, Jacqueline, and they kind of agreed that they thought James might be responsible for Angela's sickness. Caitlin said she knew James and Angela were having marital problems because James had recently mentioned that he had told Angela he wanted a divorce. Caitlin said James had been distant from time to time at work and would leave sometimes at lunch because he and Angela were having fights. Caitlin said she had not seen the package since the day she gave it to James, the package of potassium cyanide, and that the trash was collected on a daily basis, which is typical of medical establishments. Now, keep this in mind. Angela and James have 6 children. CPS has already been contacted because it ain't looking good for Angela, and they got to figure out what to do with these kids if indeed the father is arrested for the murder. So CPS meets with the children and James individually, and that CPS worker discusses with the detective her findings. And she said she felt James made some very concerning statements. Specifically, she said James had brought up the fact that Angela was suicidal and had been for some time. James claimed to the CPS worker that he personally had to revive Angela on several occasions over the last few months after she tried to commit suicide. He mentioned also that he asked Angela for divorce in December of 2022, and since that time, her depression and suicidal ideation may have increased. He said he believed Angela was intentionally overdosing on opioids and another unknown substance. However, he never reported any of these incidents to anyone. He never sought any medical attention for Angela during these alleged overdose attempts. Never made any appointments for counseling, no appointments for therapy, etc. There's no records of any of that ever in history. Why? He's lying. If you're like me, your bullshit meter, it's going off right now. So James goes on to tell this CPS worker, whose name was Sydney, incidentally, that he was sure Angela's toxicology records would come back positive for substances, but he had no idea what kind. So Sydney felt compelled to report these statements because none of Angela's children, none of them, all 6, ranging in ages from adults on down, none of these children mention their mother's depression, nor did they mention any alleged previous suicide attempts. And in Sydney's opinion, she believed it was improbable these type of events could happen with no one inside of the household outside of James being aware of it. She felt James was attempted to build a cover story to cover up what really happened to Angela. And look, these CPS workers, y'all, they are very well trained in spotting bullshit. That's important to keep in mind. Very hard to fool a CPS worker. So on March 16th, that detective also communicates with a friend of the Craig family by the name of Jennifer Reeves. And Jennifer informed the detective that James was currently at her residence and intended to spend the night with his children while he was waiting for the older children to come in from out of town, and that he would be there throughout the next morning. So, same day, March 16th, 2023, the detective submits 3 search warrants applications to the 18th Judicial District Court. One of those warrants was for James and Angela's home. One of those warrants was for the Summerbrook dental office, and the third was for Jennifer's home. And a judge signs them. And I'll tell you why they needed a search warrant for Jennifer's home. I'm going to get into it right now. So also on that day, the detective, along with a colleague, they head over to Jennifer's house. And they needed that warrant just to speak to James, essentially. And they knew he was there. So right off the bat, James says, hey, I don't want to speak about my wife's medical condition at this point. So the detectives, they provide a copy of the search warrant. And they say, look, you don't have to talk to us, but we need your cell phone. And we need Angela's cell phone, which he had possession of at this point. They also wanted his wallet and his laptop. So James hands over Angela's cell phone, and he provides the passcode for it. He then hands over his cell phone and provides the passcode for that. And he tells them, I don't have my laptop with me. It's at the dental office. But he does give the password for the laptop to the police. He also said he didn't carry a wallet. He just keeps credit cards and his ID on his phone case. So the detective takes pictures of the credit cards and James' driver's license, and then he gives everything back to James as far as credit cards are concerned. 15 minutes later, the detective, along with others, they respond to James and Angela's home to serve that search warrant. First thing they do, they clear the residence and make sure no one's inside. And the detectives noted that the house was equipped with both internal and external surveillance cameras. Now, during the search, they take multiple items they believe could be used as evidence in the case, including multiple types of protein powder, multiple workout shakers, which are the shaker drinks that you shake up the protein in, a computer tablet, and 2 different plastic Ziploc bags that both had white powdery substances in them. Neither Ziploc was labeled, and they also grabbed a water bottle on an exercise bike in the main bedroom area. Now, while executing the search warrant of the residence, they were looking for a device, some sort of hard drive that would have the data for the surveillance cameras on it, but they couldn't find any hard drive. There was a security system on the wall that could play video for the exterior only, but it wasn't something you could just easily unplug and take with you. It was wired up, right? So the detectives determined at that point it was likely all the surveillance video would be backed up to some sort of cloud-based system, which is common these days. Rarely do they have hard drives anymore. Usually it just backs up to a cloud. A couple of hours later, the detectives execute a search warrant on the Summerbrook Dental. And the office was completely closed for business this day, so they entered the office and they noticed multiple surveillance cameras on the office walls. They noted the offices were very clean, it was very orderly, and they knew from talking to the previous office manager that James was on a computer in the dental room, and they knew it was dental room 9. So they head straight there to get that computer, which they do. And they notice on the back of that computer, there was a USB removable thumb drive plugged into the back. So they seize that as well as the hard drive of that computer. And it's at this point in another area of the office, they see a laptop and hit the space bar, and they notice the last person logged into that computer was James. So they try the password James gave them for his laptop to make sure it was his. They didn't want to see somebody else's. It opened the laptop, so they realized at that point, this is the right one, and they seize that. And as they're going around the office, they also locate a small hand vacuum. And they notice on this small hand vacuum, around the nozzle, there was a white powdery substance inside of it. And that's a pretty sharp detective work right there to notice that. So, of course, they seize that small hand vacuum as well. So they head back to headquarters. And look, it's been a long day for this detective, right? He is on the case and he is everywhere. And the first thing he does is he accesses Angela's cell phone and he starts going through the texts between Angela and James. And one thing he noticed was that she had James on her phone as, quote, the boy. And there was a picture of the two of them under the text for James. So the detective starts reading through the text messages, and he starts on March 1st of 2023. And he noticed that Angela and James were discussing their relationship, mainly about James's healing and counseling. And he attached a screenshot of that text. And Angela had said to James, quote, "You don't have to do everything alone. Your healing and happiness. This marriage is more important than my day, and you are more important than my day." And James responded with, "Thank you. I know you were getting ready to go out and spend some time with friends. I would like to ask you to keep last night's conversation details just between you and I. I trust Tony," which is Tony with an I, Toni, "but it was hard for me to even tell you that stuff. I'm definitely not ready for anyone to hear it." And Angela responds with, "Of course, I wasn't planning to talk to anyone about it." And James responds with, "I'm sorry. I know she is kind of your support and your strength and somebody you can always go to vent. I hate taking away even that part of y'all's relationship since I know that's really hard for you." The detective noted that it's kind of a strange text. And as we go along here, you're going to figure out what they were talking about. So then he goes into some other texts that were made the morning of March 6th, the first day that Angela began having symptoms and went to the hospital. And these texts start at 6:59 p.m. James texts Angela, and he says, "Thank you so much for making my drink this morning. I just love you. I hope you have a great day, and I'm so glad you're back in town." Angela responds back with, "You're welcome, baby. I love you too. I think my body is not letting the caffeine this morning either. My stomach feels fine, but my head feels funny and dizzy. Very strange." James says, "It's been a week since caffeine for you. Maybe your body is saying no thank you. I did a full scoop of caffeine and a big full scoop of B vitamins. Is that how you normally take?" Angela writes back, oh no, I do a small scoop of the B vitamin mix. It feels really weird. And he writes back, James, oh, sorry, baby. I was plugging your symptoms in to Google and stroke match some of what you're describing. Do you have a weakness in your whole body or just one side? And is it both eyes or just one that feels blurry? Angela says, it feels like my whole body is, and it's tingly, and my eyes are struggling to focus. James says, are you lying down? Angela says, I got in my bed. James says, okay, good. And Angela says, my whole body feels so heavy. And James says, something's really wrong. I'm coming home with a blood pressure cuff. If nothing else, I can at least help the girls stay on track while you rest. Angela says, that's okay. It'll wear off. I'm dizzy and my eyes don't want to focus, but I can get stuff done that I need to this morning. And James says, maybe you should lie down. Angela says, I'm lying on my face on the mat in my room. James says, you have a bed, you know. Angela responds with, I'm stinky. Just seems excessive for a little extra supplement. James says, Pearl is flying in this morning to see me. I totally forgot. I think she's flying out today too, though. And then Angela says, I don't feel right in my head. James responds with, do I need to come home? Angela says, no, this is just weird. I'm dizzy in my head and my eyes are working slowly and my whole body is responding slowly. James responds back at 6:05 p.m. I'm all done and headed home. How are you feeling? Angela says, same. Belle is making grilled cheese. James responds back with, thanks, Belle. I'm all done here and headed home now. Angela says, I would like another blessing tonight if there's someone who could help. James says, okay, I'm sure we can find someone. So remember, y'all, this was the first day that she was feeling sick. And you can see this woman is not doing well. Of course, she went to the hospital, got discharged the same day, and it wasn't until March 9th that she ended up going back. And it was on March 9th at 7:17 a.m. that more texts were included in this affidavit. And at 7:17 a.m., James asked, how are you doing? And Angela responds, I feel super tired, but I left my phone on my lap, so I hope I feel it if you text. James writes back, okay, thank you. Then he writes, are you nauseous? I'm reading up on blood pressure. And Angela responds with, not today. Why? And James writes, just making sure. And then it's several other texts of her just saying she feels like shit, basically. And it seems like he's playing off like he's concerned, but he doesn't really seem concerned, if that makes any sense. And there's more. There's probably 10 pages of these texts. I'm not going to go over all of them, but a few that stuck out. There's one situation where they're talking about blood pressure, and his wife had wrote, my blood pressure is 114/81 right now. I have a low-grade fever. James responds with, man, your blood pressure is all over the board. 145/45 followed by 114/81. Somebody needs to tell your brain to get it together. She writes back, I've been saying that forever. And it's kind of sad, these texts, because you go over and they're talking about kids. This woman is worried about her kids way more than herself at this point, and knowing how this ended up, it's just really sad to read over these. So we'll continue on. And look, in every case like this, the number one thing that catches people is by far their Google search history. Not only is that a roadmap to what they were thinking and doing, those that are accused, but it's also the first thing in most cases detectives are going to check. And this was no exception. On March 17th, the detectives, they do a search history on those computers and laptop and hard drives that they seized. And they open up Google Chrome, and it brings them to James Craig's email. And they go through that email, and they're able to see a history of the email account. And they notice that this particular email was labeled Jim Craig in the history. And on that email, It begins February 27th of 2023. And guess what they observed? The first thing they observed are that the user conducted searches related to poison. And in those searches, there were search phrases. And get what he was searching. Quote, how many grams of pure arsenic will kill a human? Unquote. How about another one? Is arsenic detectable in an autopsy? Unquote. Not only that, but he had searched chemical suppliers in Aurora, Colorado, and had made a purchase via Amazon. So they clicked to see what the Amazon purchase was. And who knew, at least at this point in time, you could even get this off of Amazon. But on February 27th, 2023, he purchased arsenic metallic powder from Amazon, and it costs $13. Can you believe it? And get this, in the description of that item, it says that arsenic is often believed to be used for murder, as it has been in many crime novels. And the second portion of the description stated, quote, the real danger is in swallowing it, which could prove fatal. You can't make this shit up. James also searched arsenic on a chemistry website. The search history also provided YouTube searches for, get this, the top 5 undetectable poisons that show no signs of foul play. He searched for how to make poison. And he searched for the top 10 deadliest plants that can kill you. Now, this detective, he then digs deeper into the actual emails, and he notices that James had already purchased arsenic in the past. This was not his first time. But the detective also finds some other emails. And those emails contained communications between someone by the name of Karen Kane. So let's get into that relationship. And the detective noted that the emails exchanged between Karen Kane and James were, quote, intimate in nature and contained sexually explicit conversations, unquote. There were also travel plans within those emails to Karen Kane. The first travel dates were March 8th through 10th of 2023, which showed Karen traveling from Austin, Texas to Denver, Colorado. Now, keep in mind, Angela was hospitalized the 9th through the 14th. How sick is this fucker? There was also another flight itinerary, and this one was from March 16th through the 20th of 2023. The flight was purchased on March 4th of 2023, which was the same day that the arsenic was delivered to James's house, according to Amazon records. So he had one box delivered to his office, one box delivered to his house. There was a follow-up email from Karen on March 16th of 2023, and that follow-up email suggested that James had told her something had happened to Angela and that she was in the hospital and probably going to die. Karen had also sent James an email explaining how sorry she was for him and that she wished she could help him, that she knew it was so hard for him what he was going through and wanted to be there for him, but didn't want to mix with him and his family and friends and pretend only to be a friend when there was so much more between them. And it was signed Karen Kane, get ready for this, DDS MS. Karen Kane is an orthodontist in Marble Falls, Texas, according to the affidavit. Another doctor. So that being said, she had nothing to do, obviously, with what he was doing. I'm sure knew nothing about it. She definitely knew he was married. And I'm sure he was telling her he was leaving his wife, but whatever. We'll move on. So on March 17th, and look, incidentally, this case had not been going on very long at this point. By March 17th, They've already got all this evidence. This detective has interviewed, it seems like, everybody in Aurora, Colorado. He is like the Energizer Bunny. Shout out to this guy. He did a phenomenal job already having all this evidence. But on March 17th, he speaks with Angela's sister, and that was Tony with an I. Remember her? And Tony with an I stated that she and Angela spoke almost daily. They were very close, and she said Angela visited with her in Utah, where Tony lived, from March 1st through the 5th, and was never sick, never complained about not feeling well. And remember, the next day was when all the shit started and she started feeling ill. Tony said that Angela and James' marriage had always been tumultuous. She said James had multiple affairs with several women. He had told Angela in the past he was addicted to pornography since he was a teenager, which would explain those texts I read to you earlier. Remember I said they would make sense? That's what he was referencing. So apparently Angela did tell Tony, even though he didn't want her to. Tony also claimed that James drugged Angela 6 years prior with an unknown drug. She said he planned to go into the bathroom and give himself a lethal injection of something and commit suicide, and that he told her before he did this, he drugged her so she wouldn't be able to find him nor be able to save him, which would give the lethal drugs time to kick in and kill him. This fucker is nuts. Tony also said Angela told her several times over the past 16 years that she was going to leave James, but said James always convinced her to stay. Tony said Angela told her that James had run the dental office into the ground and the finances were dire. Sister knows everything, right? Tony also said that Angela told her James recently traveled to Las Vegas, where he gambled away $2,000. Tony also said when James updated her on Angela's status, he said he would not allow hospital staff to conduct an autopsy. And Angela didn't like this. She said maybe it's something genetic and I need to know what caused this so I can be on the lookout for it or my kids can be on the lookout for it. But he wouldn't listen. He said, we ain't doing an autopsy. As a matter of fact, he was quoted as saying, if they couldn't find out what was wrong with her when she was alive, I'm not going to let them poke her more when she's dead. What a legit asshole. So it's at this point that the detective, he does some studying on cyanide, and especially what happens when you ingest it. And he learns that typically it causes chest pain, confusion, dizziness, eye pain, difficulty breathing, headaches, nausea, all the symptoms that Angela had. And eventually it will cause seizures, coma, and then death. So I'm going to read you verbatim the conclusion that this detective came up with. And again, shout out to him. Amazing job of writing the affidavit. Probably the best, most well-written affidavit I've ever come across in all my time of covering cases like this. But here's what his conclusion said verbatim. Throughout this investigation, your affiant is the detective in this case. That's how they're written in affidavits. Your affiant has spoken to numerous people who have provided insight into Angela and James Craig's relationship. Not one person has suggested or even seen any source of suicidal ideations from Angela. James had provided those statements to the Department of Human Services employees, who, after hearing those statements, felt that James was trying to make a point to have some source of cover-up story to prevent his incrimination. James has made varied statements to various audiences. He told the Department of Human Services that Angela was suicidal and he had saved her many times but never reported it. James had told fellow employees that his marriage was failing and he was in financial turmoil. He has also been recently communicating with a woman named Karen Kane about what appears to be a sexually intimate relationship. It appears James was flying this woman into Denver while his wife and the mother of his children were dying in the hospital. In totality, this investigation has proven that James has gone to great lengths to try and end his wife's life. On February 27th of 2023, he created a new Gmail account, jimandwaffles@gmail.com, which he only used in dental room number 9 within his practice. This email account was not found on his cell phone, his laptop, nor Angela's phone. While using this account, he researched multiple, quote, undetectable poisons and eventually purchased Arsenic from Amazon.com. After buying this poison, he received an email from Karen Kane about her intention to fly to Denver, Colorado for March 8th through 10th of 2023. On March 4th of 2023, the arsenic was delivered to James' mailbox at his home residence. On March 4th, 2023, James received another email from Karen Kane for a trip that was scheduled March 16th through 20th, 2023, with a flight plan. On March 5th of 2023, Angela returned home from a trip to Utah. On March 6th of 2023, Angela was admitted to the hospital as she complained that her head felt funny. She was dizzy and her eyes were not focusing. She continued that she did not feel right in her head and her body was responding slowly. These symptoms were consistent with some of the symptoms from arsenic. These symptoms, per the CDC, were vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, dehydration, altered mental state, or organ failure. Angela was released from the hospital on March 6th of 2023. James then ordered, and I can't pronounce this word, it looks like Orlindrin, 1 milligram in the quantity of 3. These items were intercepted by FedEx and not delivered to James. On March 8th, according to flight plans from February 27th, Karen Kane came to Denver, Colorado. James then ordered Sigma 207810, potassium cyanide, from Midland Scientific with a request to have it overnighted. He requested to pick the items up personally on March 9th of 2023. Specifically, there were delays in the shipment due to verifying his credentials. James responded while Angela was in the hospital that he could complete the form and that the potassium cyanide was needed for surgery. James showed impatience in the email stream between him and the Midland Scientific employee. James then told his employee, Caitlin, that he had a package coming to the office on March 13th, and that package was personal. The package was accidentally opened by an employee named Katie, and Caitlin took the package, repackaged it, knowing James requested it not be opened. As Caitlin repackaged the item, she saw it was potassium cyanide. Caitlin never saw potassium cyanide within the business again. It should have remained in the business if it was truly for surgery, as James alleged. On March 14th of 2023, Angela was released from the hospital and returned home. On March 15th of 2023, Angela returned back to the hospital at approximately 11 a.m. This time, Angela was at a different hospital. She started to suffer from a severe seizure and was intubated. Angela suffered from lack of oxygen, no pupil reaction, and began to have intracranial pressure. This led Angela to the medical intensive care unit where she was on life support and did not regain brain activity. James was known to make Angela protein shakes regularly and had administered many to her. It was believed he had provided Angela with the poison through those shakes. Per the CDC, the more severe symptoms include high or low blood pressure, loss of consciousness, lung injury, seizures, coma, and death. James had ordered multiple poisons that were not known to have been located during the searches of his residence or business. James has not attempted to speak with police regarding what occurred with his wife, but has made statements that he had the answers to what happened. James has only repeatedly asked for his phone back. Based on the totality of the investigation, James has shown the planning and intent to end his wife's life by searching for ways to kill someone undetected, providing her poisons that align with her hospitalized symptoms, and working on starting a new life with Karen Kane. Your affiant finds there is more than enough preliminary evidence sufficient to arrest James Craig with premeditated first-degree murder, and it's signed by the detective. So on March 19th of 2023, which is the day after his wife's death, James Craig is indeed arrested and charged with the first-degree murder of his wife, as well as tampering with evidence. But you know how the wheels of justice turn, very slow, and time will pass, a lot of time. And on December 3rd of 2024, over a year and a half later, the lawyer representing James Craig, he suddenly quits the case. And for 24 hours, many would wonder why. But the suspected answer would surface just a day later, when on December 4th of 2024, 2 new charges were added to James' growing list of charges. Those 2 new charges included solicitation to commit perjury and solicitation of murder. So let's break this down. Apparently, some tomfoolery was going on with this dentist since his incarceration, because he never got out. He didn't bail out. And among the things he attempted to get done, allegedly, he tried to get a friend to go inside his house and hide several notes throughout the home that were typed up by his wife, allegedly, claiming to be suicide notes. Then, after learning that an inmate's daughter knew how to make deepfake videos, he tried to hire her to make one of his wife, asking him to order cyanide for her. And if y'all don't know how these deepfake works, you can take a video. I've seen one of Tom Cruise where it sounds just like him, looks just like him, and the mouth is moving just like him, but it ain't Tom Cruise. It's a very scary advancement in technology. So he gets busted for that. Then another inmate turns him in after the dentist offers him an undisclosed amount of money to murder the lead detective, the guy I've been telling you about this whole time on this case. How about that? He even approached a fellow inmate and asked that fellow inmate to find several attractive females on the outside who would be willing to testify that they were having affairs with him. And his thought process was that they would testify to that and then say that Angela found out they were having affairs with him and wanted to hire the females to go into cahoots with her in an effort to frame him. The most bizarre bullshit I've ever heard. And all this comes out a day after his lawyer quits. The timing is impeccable. And it's obvious to me the lawyer wanted nothing more to do with this jackass. So while the trial was supposed to take place near the end of 2024 or at the latest, very early 2025, guess what? It still ain't happened as of this recording. Why? Well, his lawyer quit. And now a lawyer had to come in, a new lawyer, and they've got to familiarize themselves with this entire case. And it just delays the shit out of everything. So here we are over 2 years after this happened, and still no justice for Angela Craig and those who loved her after her husband allegedly poisoned her with smoothies tainted with cyanide. Freaking horrible. But that being said, justice is coming for Dr. James Craig, and I'll keep you updated. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon, commercial-free early releases, bonus episodes, quarterly gifts for our top-tier Patreon members, and so much more. Patreon.com/exposed podcast files. And until next time, for exposed, scandalous files of the elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.